So in the last lesson, we learned how to encrypt and write our security rules for our users collection. But what about our collections collection? Let's actually encrypt that using very similar style of rules because they're probably going to be the same. The only difference is we're going to tweak it based on the needs of that database in particular. So we're going to match, just as we did before, our collections collection, and we're going to target every collection document object inside. Now, what we want users to do is they should be allowed to get both the list as well as the individual document reference objects. This is perfectly fine because they actually need it to populate our web application. So we will allow read with no other stipulations about needing them to be authenticated or not. Doesn't really matter. They can totally read. The only person, though, that should be allowed to create anything to this collection should be the user that is our own user. We are the administrator of this website. We should be the only person that should be allowed to create or update any of these things. In order for that rule to work, we can actually say allow write if the request is authenticated. So we make sure that it's not null. And we make sure that the authenticated UID is our own user. So what you can do is go into either your database or your authentication tab, find your email for your account, and then copy that user ID. And then what you're going to do is you are just going to paste it here. And this rule essentially now states that the only person that is allowed to actually make and build new collections is your own user. So the only way you can do it is you have to make sure you're also signed into the application, but this is perfectly fine. So now, as long as we're signed in, we're actually now able to write to our collections. And this is something you might want to do in the future if you make some kind of dashboard or something like that, but this rule allows you to do pretty much the same thing. And this is pretty much all we need for our collections to also be now encrypted. We can even test this out by saying that if we were trying to build a new collections at this same, doesn't really matter, some new collection object, and let's say we're trying to build a new trench coat section. So the name of the section will be trench coats. If that were the case and we were not our user and we tried to run this create function, we'll be denied. But if we are our user and we run it, we'll see that we succeeded. So we've pretty much seen how these rules and these conditions can work for both our collections as well as our users. And this is pretty much all we need in order to encrypt our database. The last step now is to simply publish our new changes so that these are actually what goes live. And with that, our database is now secure. So what I challenge you to do is delete everything that you saw me write and try it yourself. And this way you can see whether or not you're actually familiar with the security rules. You can also now completely build new features around these security rules to have a full understanding of everything that we've done in this course, alongside these security rules, to see if you have a full understanding of how the flow of a new feature would get implemented. And the feature that I'm actually going to request that you build is to move the actual storage of the cart into Firebase. So as far as our cart dropdown is supposed to go, there are different actions that trigger updating the cart as we remember throughout this course. The challenge now is to write the appropriate sagas or update the appropriate sagas so that what happens is that if a user is signed in, they are able to update or create a cart inside of the database. And then once they've actually made updates or they've signed out, if they sign back in, they should be able to pull in their cart that is stored in our database into the application so that they can continue from where they left off. I will, of course, include the code inside of the final repo here, inside of your resources folder, so that you can see how I would implement such a feature. But the challenge is for you students to actually take a tackle at building out this slightly complex feature yourself. Figure out what security rules you got to write, figure out all the sagas, figure out the actions, figure out what code you have to update. And this is the best way to make sure that you've solidified your full understanding of everything we've done with all of these libraries and all of these services building our e-commerce platform. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson on security rules, and hopefully with this, you'll be able to take a challenge and try out this feature that I've just suggested with moving the cart into our Firestore database. There will actually also be a couple new things you might have to look at and get familiar with inside of the Firebase documentation, but I will list all of the details in the next lesson. It'll be an article and it'll include all the resources you need to tackle this coding challenge, as well as the final solution there as well. So good luck, everyone, and I will see you in the next lesson.